Howdy folks, Josh McCarthy with Cowboys of the Cross here. We started a little video series on just how to live out this Christian life, or as James would say, being a doer of the word and not a hearer only. I've been doing a Bible reading plan the past couple of years, and it always brings me around to this passage in Romans 2 that's a bit of a gut punch for me whenever I read it, but I think it's something we need to think through in our daily lives. It starts like this in verse 17. Indeed, you are called a Jew, and rest on the law, and make your boast in God, and know his will, and approve the things that are excellent, being instructed out of the law, and are confident that you yourself are a guide to the blind, a light to those who are in darkness, an instructor of the foolish, a teacher of babes, having the form of knowledge and truth in the law. You, therefore, who teach another, do you not teach yourself? You who preach that a man should not steal, do you steal? You who say, do not commit adultery, do you commit adultery? You who abhor idols, do you rob temples? You who make your boast in the law, do you dishonor God through breaking the law? For the name of God is blasphemed among the Gentiles because of you, as it is written. Paul really doesn't beat around the bush in this passage. He basically calls the people of God to task for how they're living their lives. It's one thing to, give advice or give instruction or tell others how they're supposed to live, but it's completely different when you're the one that has to practice what you preach. Um, Heck, look at the sins of this world. Look at around us, go on the news or Facebook or anything, and it is really easy to pinpoint other sin, to say, well, they just need to stop doing that, or that's terrible. And yet there is sin out there. I'm not saying there isn't. There's definitely sin out there, and it's definitely terrible. But we need to make sure that when we do that, when we call out this sin that's in the world, that we're doing it from a point where we're not indulging our own sin. We're not just, keeping our sins hidden or ignoring our own sin in our lives, even when it could be glaringly obvious to others around us. But we don't want to address it. We don't want to deal with our own sin. We need everybody else to deal with theirs, but we're going to hold ourselves to a different standard, than the world. We're gonna hold the world to a higher standard than we will ourselves. We'll let our sins slide. We'll deal with that at some point, whenever that may be. We've probably all worked with that old timer that will, be pretty gruff and tell you better move those cows nice and easy and take it slow, and you better not do this and better not do that, and you got to do it the right way, and everything like that, and you'll listen to him, you'll give him his credits due and try to follow along, but then you'll go on a gather with him and you'll trot off, to get your own little bunch of cows, and look back and see him not about 5 minutes later, and something's got flustered up, and so he kicks his horse into high gear and he starts ramming and jamming, and next thing you know, he's busted a yearling or a calf or something through the fence and got a big blow up, and you got to go leave your cows and help him, and you spend the rest of your day digging cows out of the neighbor's pasture and patching fence. It's one thing if that happened once, but when you got that kind of a guy and it happens again and again and again, every time he gets on your case or harps about something, you're not going to pay attention to it. You're not going to, appreciate it. You're going to be resentful and ignore it. It's going to be in one ear and out the other, because you come to the point where you realize that he doesn't practice what he preaches. He's more of a do as I say, not as I do kind of a guy. And so this is kind of what Paul's addressing here in this passage, is calling us to task to practice what we preach. Like I said before, it's real easy to point out the sins of the others or the sins of the world. And yeah, there's a lot of sin out there. There's no doubt about it. But we also need to make sure that we aren't ignoring our own sin, that we aren't indulging in the same sin that we think other people shouldn't be doing. It's really easy to look at somebody, oh man, they're such a jerk, look at how they act or treat or talk to other people. But then, when the chips are down and you get angry or flustered and you're barking at somebody else, you're doing the exact same thing. You're not practicing what you preach. You're um, basically, for lack of a better term, being a hypocrite. And I'm not saying that, we got to attain some type of perfection, because we're not perfect. We are still sinners. Even as Christians, we're sinners saved by grace. And we're going to sin, but there's a difference between ignoring that sin and repenting of that sin. Um, if we're repenting of our sin, hopefully, 5, 10 years down the road, we can look back and see that, yeah, okay, I've come a little bit. I've progressed. I don't get as quick tempered as I used to, or whatever your sin may be. I don't have that impulse to steal or commit adultery or rob temples. As Paul calls it out in here. Fill in the blank with your sin of choice. You know, because it really has to start with us. This is a pretty crazy world we're living in, and there's a lot of things that are going wrong. We can all see that. You don't have to be blind to see what's going on in this world, but I can't change all of it. But I can change myself. And I think that's where anything, if this world's going to go anywhere, it's got to start with Christians practicing what we preach, following through on what God calls us to, how God calls us to live. And that starts with taking our own sin seriously. So I'm going to leave you with that question to end this. Do you take your own sin seriously? All right. We'll catch you later. Adios.